Hello, everyone. All right, so we're going to, in this video, go over the second category of informal fallacies, which are fallacies of presumption. Again, you have access to this presentation if you look over on, let's see, this. We're still on topic 5, informal fallacies. These two were due last week. This week, you have these 4 due. I know it's a lot, but it replaces coming to class and doing homework. So it's a probably less than 2 classes worth of work. Um, but so don't feel so overwhelmed by it. But these are the 4 that are due, and then I'll talk about the other things that are due next week. So we're going to talk about the second family. If you click on here, you'll get to this assignment, which you're already on, and the link right there is to the presentation. So, okay, we're going to talk about fallacies of presumption. Fallacies of presumption occur because the premises assume what they claim to prove. Okay, they make an unjustified assumption, which is called a presumption, which is often suggested by the argument either deliberately or mistakenly. This makes the argument very misleading because the presumption often remains unnoticed. So basically, what it's saying is the error in here is that there's some sort of unwarranted or unjustified assumption somewhere within the premises. So when you get to the conclusion, if you didn't notice that there was some assumption in there that's not warranted, you might be led to believe it. But if you notice that there was some unwarranted assumption or presumption, then you'll realize that the conclusion doesn't necessarily follow from the premises. There are 3 major types of fallacies of presumption: begging the question, false dichotomy, and suppressed evidence. So here's a Dilbert comic, begging the question, where the dog says, "What is the key to success?" And this person says, "Hire the right employees." The dog says, "How do you know you hired the right employees?" "You know because the business is successful." "So the key to success is circular reasoning?" "Yes, because circular reasoning is the key." So this is sort of an obvious one, but basically in the first 2 panels, saying the key to success is hiring the right employees, and you know they're the right employees because you have a successful business. So again, it's sort of going in circles. So this is one type of begging the question. In begging the question, the premises are presumed to provide adequate support for the conclusion, when in reality they don't. They only create the illusion that they do. And there are 3 different ways in which begging the question can occur. It can either leave out a key premise, sort of assume it and not say it explicitly. The conclusion could simply just restate the premise, or the argument involves circular reasoning. So the first type of begging the question is leaving out a key premise. Often this is deliberate because that premise might be controversial, or the arguer can't really prove that that premise is true. So, for example, if someone were to make this argument, murder is morally wrong, therefore active euthanasia is morally wrong. They've made a jump here from murder being wrong to active euthanasia being wrong. And there's a missing premise in there. They've left out the key premise. The key premise is that active euthanasia is murder, right? So if someone were to just look at this argument that murder is wrong, say, yeah, I agree with that. And say, therefore, active euthanasia is morally wrong. You might be like, oh, well, I do agree that murder is wrong. So, okay, yeah, active euthanasia is morally wrong, without realizing that the person has equated active euthanasia with murder. Now, you might agree with this or you might disagree, but the point is you need to know that that's a key premise that's left out, because you need to figure out whether or not you agree with that. Most people will agree with murder as being wrong. The second part, active euthanasia is murder, we may not agree with, right? Think about if this argument were something like murder is wrong, therefore abortion is wrong. Well, that means that you're saying abortion is murder. And that's exactly what people disagree about, whether or not it is murder, right? So by leaving out a key premise, again, sometimes it's deliberate, and it's usually deliberate because it's controversial and they don't want to go there, or they can't really prove that that premise is true. The second type is where the conclusion is just restated in the premise. So Again, the arguer is creating this illusion that the premise provides independent evidence for the conclusion, but it doesn't. So someone who says something like, anyone who hosts Saturday Night Live is a star because only celebrities host Saturday Night Live. Okay, so the conclusion here is anyone who hosts Saturday Night Live is a star. The premise is celebrities host Saturday Night Live, but the definition of a celebrity is a star. So you're basically saying anyone who hosts SNL is a star because only stars host SNL, but you're not giving any other evidence or proof to support the fact that SNL is hosted by stars. Okay, and then the last one is circular reasoning. And again, this is similar to restating the premise, except there's usually more than one step in between. So it's like a chain of evidence, but in the end, the conclusion just basically starts where it began. So here it says, another Dilbert comic, and we know mass creates gravity because dense planets have more gravity. And then, well, how do we know which planets are more dense? Because they have more gravity. So, and then, the dog points out that circular reasoning. So basically what Dilbert is saying is we know mass creates gravity because denser planets have more gravity. And the dog says, well, how do you know they have more gravity? He says, or how do you know they're denser? He says, because they have more gravity. So again, that's sort of circular reasoning. And if it's confusing, it should be. That's sort of how circular reasoning works. It's not giving any additional information. I feel like this is a good example, again, whether or not you agree, but I think it's a good example. So people who say, well, I'm not going to vote for Bernie Sanders. Why? Because Bernie Sanders can't win. Well, why can't Bernie Sanders win? Because people aren't voting for him, right? So it's sort of circular. I'm not going to vote for Bernie because he can't win. He can't win because people don't vote for him. Right? That's another, hopefully you can see how that's also circular reasoning. So for begging the question, so those are the three types of begging the question, either leaving out a premise, restating the premise or restating the conclusion as a premise, or circular reasoning. To check if, for begging the question, check to see if you've made a jump from the premise to the conclusion by skipping some other premise. Check to see if your premises actually provide independent evidence from the conclusion, or if it's just restating the same thing. And just make sure you're not doing that circular kind of thing. So if for some reason there is a jump and you haven't provided independent evidence and it's a circular reasoning, then you are committing begging the question. On the other hand, if you're not jumping to the conclusions and you're not doing a circular reasoning, but you do have independent evidence, then that's a legitimate argument. So I'm going to stop here and make another video for the rest of the